So today I'm going to talk about the very first governance report for the NGEHT, in which we conduct a comparative assessment of risk mitigation strategies across physics collaborations. This report was co-authored by members of the task force, some of whom are in the audience today. That includes Rochelle, Vitaly, Martin, Cornelia, and Helena. And I would also like to acknowledge everyone else who engaged in very useful discussions and provided invaluable feedback. So, in this initial stage of inquiry, our goal was to track the correlation between organizational and epistemic risks and the strength of democratic decision making and participation. So, we looked to three transnational particle collaborations in order to motivate the search. And in fact, our findings raised our credence that there is an inverse correlation between these two factors. So, what does that mean? Well, it appears that when democratic governance is weak, collaborations are susceptible to common risks. And a few that we've identified include concentration of authority, conflicts of interest interfering with epistemic aims, insufficient transparency and accountability, and even groupthink. What we realized is that strong democratic mechanisms in and of themselves serve as risk mitigation strategies. And a few examples that we explore are incorporating elected leadership positions, implementing checks and balances for all boards and committees, and promoting diverse representation across domains of expertise and demographics. So, our report is divided into two major priorities. We lead with the prescriptive priority, in which we recommend risk mitigation strategies preliminarily under 6 proposed benchmarks for democratic practices. So, we really explore the advantages of a tiered membership model. We look at certain specialized governance functions, and we also look at the impact of varying staffing procedures, which blend elected and appointed positions. We strongly believe that we should prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion. We lay out certain mechanisms for transparency and accountability, and we also explore how to facilitate knowledge flow. So, along with these risk mitigation strategies, we include cost benefit analyses to better understand implications for institutional resilience because of course the benefits might also be accompanied with some costs. And in order to give a better sense of our reasoning and our motivation for the case studies, we transition to the second major priority, which is descriptive. So we looked at Atlas and Alice, both of which are CERN collaborations, and Mu2E. And we chose them specifically because they meet certain similarity criteria that provides good comparison with the NGEHT collaboration. We noticed topical and cultural overlap between particle physics and astrophysics. These are collaborations that involve global membership. And we also wanted an example of collaborations being integrated within a parent organization in anticipation of what probably will happen with the NGHT and EHT. But we also picked these case studies because they meet certain dissimilarity criteria to provide useful contrast. That includes emphasis on top-down governance, a curated authorship process, and very high valuing of consensus. So what we wanted to do was really understand the opposite end of the spectrum to derive some positive and cautionary lessons for how we might balance top-down governance with more grassroots and bottom-up sort of strategies. And then finally, we identified natural next steps in subsequent stages of inquiry. We plan to delve into questions about overcoming obstacles to robust democratic mechanisms because there were a few common themes that we noticed. One was how resource intensive it is to structure a bureaucracy. Crisis management can really upend the channels that you've developed. And there's this really interesting meta-level conundrum where we would ideally adopt governance structures democratically, but who is entitled to weigh in when we don't have a membership policy? And of course, establishing that first layer of governance structures will inherently be less democratic than we would like for the future. So here are some requisite action items that really mandate collaboration with other task forces. We need to develop robust guidelines for membership and authorship that are, subject to future amendments. We should also draft a cooperation plan between the NGEHT and EHT, and we would like to generate various examples of organizational networks that can, then be vetted with the input of the whole collaboration. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the great talk. I had a question about one of your first points, and that's the relationship between the democratic process and groupthink. And I was wondering how you thought they interacted. Found a lot of groupthink and large collaborations in groups. Just wondering how it factored in.
Right. So we noticed there seemed to be a direct correlation between concentration of authority and groupthink. We did suggest ways to, while it's necessary for the purpose of stability and meeting contractual obligations, how to really blend appointed and elected leadership positions and, prevent entrenchment, include checks and balances like term limits, rotations, things like that. And this is also related to how to facilitate knowledge flow. One of Vitaly's main areas of research was epistemic injustice. And we really want to promote mobility, professional mobility, especially across different domains of expertise, such as between, experimentalists, data analysts, and instrumentalists. Just to make sure that we are constantly not only coming back to the actual knowledge that's being produced, but the standards of procedures that also have epistemic consequences.
One of the themes that Adrian Butrich emphasized was the importance of communication and the way that knowledge is formed through communication. It's not that knowledge pre-exists and then just needs to be passed around in a distributed way. And that I was struck in the way learning as I am about the different ways that, say, NASA and NSF think about things. I'm struck, at NASA, there's a huge emphasis in their understanding of inclusivity, of making sure that people feel like they're participating, that they have full information, that communication is really, multilateral and effective. So it just struck me as an interesting place where communication and DEI and some of the other themes that we talked about across the day and also in your talk here connect.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's something that certainly merits more detailed examination. So in this report, we stuck to big picture recommendations, and we haven't crafted, policies at the individual level. But, certainly as we learn about how to, democratize communication and just, make sure access to information is equitable across the collaboration, what would be interesting is to see how to balance that with the time and energy consumption of creating and maintaining those communication channels, as well as making sure that this increased transparency is not being used in a way to micromanage or impose control. So, while I completely agree with you that there's this symbiotic relationship between communication and knowledge production, one of the biggest challenges that, I think really should be one of the priorities for the next stage of inquiry is to really understand what are the unintended consequences when we try to execute them.
Join me in thanking Patrick.
Thank you so much.